mates with the sex cells. Females make ova, males make sperm. So, we need to look at some of the parts here. On the models, I'm going to take this one apart so that it doesn't fall apart on me. On this cross section of the female, you can see the ovary has a little fimbriae laying over it on this model. It's a pretty good model to look at, so it's pretty easy to see. But you can look at more than one model. This one up here is a little more visual, or a little it's bigger. There's the ovary on this one. See, the ovary is real accessible as far as we don't see it. Now, this kind of gets a little dry as whack or whatever. Here is the ovum here. And around this is some follicular cells. Now, I have the slide over there on the side that shows the cross-section of an ovary. You can see all the follicular cells. You can see the ovum there, the ovum side actually, and that Graafian follicle. So you can see it. It's all labeled on the card over there. The corpus luteum we've talked about in class in lecture. You know that once ovulation occurs, I don't see that little chart in here. Once ovulation occurs and the egg leaves, the follicular cells are left behind become the corpus luteum. And that's what's going to produce the progesterone and estrogen. Remember, progesterone is going to be in higher levels than estrogen to finish the buildup of the uterine lining. So we kind of saw that in lecture, and you can find it on one of these charts in here. I think it's in the back over there.
This one?
Yeah, that one's a good one, yeah. Okay. So you can see, again, this is the ovary thing, where you see that after ovulation, the cells are left behind, the follicular cells, become this yellow mass called the corpus luteum. That's going to produce your progesterone and estrogen, so you can see that pretty easy on this one. Oogenesis, production of ova, or eggs. Just like spermatogenesis is the production of sperm. So that's pretty easy to remember on that one. The uterine tube is the same thing as the fallopian tube. That's going to be the tube that will convey the egg toward the uterus. It has to be picked up first. You can see it on there. On here, you can see this fallopian tube here, or uterine tube, whichever one you want to call it. Right there, so it's pretty easy to see. And even on this one, you can see it on this one too. It's right there. Now feel the little tube. That's going to be the fallopian tube or uterine tube, whichever one you want to call it. All right. The end of that fallopian tube has a little hand-like structure, a little finger-like structure called fimbriae. They're going to lay over the surface of the ovary, and about the time of ovulation, they sweep over the surface and scoop the egg up. So you can see it on here. Here are the fimbriae on this model, all these little finger-like structures. You can see them right there on this model, the fimbriae. So they're going to sweep across the surface of the ovary in search of the egg. And when they get it, they're going to scoop it up into this fallopian tube or uterine tube, and the opening they're going to scoop the egg up into is called the infundibulum. So see, this egg has been scooped up and it's traveled into the opening here. It's called the infundibulum. Once it gets in there, remember, this is lined with ciliated columnar epithelial cells. So they're going to be beating and moving that egg over the next 3 days toward the uterus, so it can implant the uterine lining. The parts of the uterus, as far as the lining goes, you can see it on this model and on this model pretty easily. You can see it on that one too, don't think of it. I'll point that one out. The perimetrium is the serous membrane covering of this uterus on the outside. The myometrium is the smooth muscle, which is red here. The endometrium is the inside lining of the uterus. So it lines the uterine cavity on the inside. I did this in lecture 2, showing you that this endometrial lining is made up of 2 parts, the stratum bassalis and the stratum functionalis. But the salus is up against the smooth muscle, the myometrium. And every month it builds up new layer on top of it called the stratum functionalis. There's a lot of blood vessels and glands and stuff in there. And that's what the egg showing implant is the stratum functionalis. If nothing happens, that, I circled it in red, that is sloughed off in the menstrual flow. So that's what's lost. That layer of cells, the stratum functionalis is lost. And then the stratum basalis builds a new one up the next month. So it keeps a fresh lining on the inside of the uterus for implantation of a fertilized egg. Looking at the parts of this uterus too, this top part, the dome portion, is called the fundus. Here's your body. And this end of the uterus down here is the cervix. So the fundus is at the top, the body in the middle, and the cervix is this down here. Now, in this cervix, there's a canal. And that canal has two openings. One that opens into the vagina, and one that opens into the uterine cavity. The one that opens into the uterine cavity is called the internal os. Os means like mouth or opening. So it's the internal opening of this cervical canal, called the internal os. The one that opens into the vagina on this end is the external os. So those are just the openings of the cervical canal. The cervical canal goes through the cervix. Something else, you can see how the cervix is stuck down into the vagina here. And when it does that, it makes a little pocket all the way around the cervix. That little pocket is called the fornix. It's called the fornix. Again, you can see it on all these models. The cervix isn't quite as long on this model, but you can see the fornix around it. And then you have the vagina here, which is a female copulatory organ. On this model, there's the uterus, the fundus, the body, the cervix, the fornix on both sides, that's all around it. And then there's the vagina on this model. The female erectile tissue is homologous to the glans penis of the male, is the clitoris. And then there are two labia. Remember, labia means lip. The labia majora, the large lip, and the labia minora, just medial. So there are two pairs. And the majora is homologous to the scrotum in the male. The mons pubis is this little fat pad on the belly. And it's like a shock absorber, sexual intercourse, so it's going to have that little fat pad there. Apart. We know what the uterine cavity is. It's the space inside the uterus. You know, this one is real open, so that when the egg implants, it can develop into, you know, a fetus, it'll be a fetus, and develop into a little baby. We have a word, ovulation. Remember what ovulation is? It's the release of the egg from the ovary, called ovulation. And so that vesicular follicle, Brachythian follicle, whatever, on day 14 in the 28-day cycle, is going to pop and that egg's going to come out. That's called ovulation. And the fimbriae will scoop it up into the infundibulum, into the uterine tube or fallopian tube, and travels and implants on the inside of the uterine lining over the next 3 or 4 days. I've already talked about some of this, like besides menstruation. Well, menstrual flow is this layer of the endometrium being sloughed off. And once that's gone, that's the end of the menstrual flow, and then it builds up a new one for the next month. There were some enzymes that are listed, some hormones that are listed there, estrogen and progesterone. Prior to ovulation, the follicular cells are pumping out estrogen and progesterone, and estrogen is on higher levels than progesterone. After ovulation, the corpus luteum is still making estrogen and progesterone. It's just that progesterone is in higher levels than estrogen to finish the uterine lining, finish building the uterine lining up real fast. That's what it does. You know that if the follicular cells and the corpus luteum make the female sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone, Which cells in the male make testosterone? Interstitial cells, right. Yeah. That's what I'm checking. I got them over there on the scopes, and they have the little cards, so everything's labeled for you. So you can see everything over there. And oxytocin there. So I had to define oxytocin. Oxytocin is responsible for uterine contractions. That's one thing that it can do. But it's also responsible for ejection of milk. So I wrote down what lactation is. Secretion, which prolactin promotes lactation, gets the alveoli going, and then oxytocin is responsible for helping to eject that milk from the female breast. So hormones are involved in this thing called lactation. We have a, let me get it here in the back. This is the one that came off the torsos. You can make the torsos female or male. And it shows all the adipose, and it doesn't show any glandular material on here. The other ones do, but they also show a lot of tumors. And it shows the pigmented portion of the circle. It's a little disc. Pigmented disc is the areola, and the part that sticks up out of the center of that disc is the nipple. So if you have pictures in the lecture, you can see that again too, or you can look at one of those other models and you see the same thing on there. This is just the one that I like the best, but you can't see it on the other ones too. So okay. Vaginal orifice. That's the opening of the vagina. Okay, and around that, there's oftentimes a small membrane called the hymen. And that's the thing that gets some women killed or some girls killed in other countries if that's torn or something, because that's supposed to be an indicator of virginity, right? And you gotta be real careful in some countries of that. So, I mean, it may or may not be predominantly surrounding that vaginal orifice. So that's what it is. You can look that up on the internet and see all different kinds of hymens. They do drawings, okay? Some are perforated, some are not, some are completely occluded, so it just varies. It can be just a little ring. So, okay, anybody have any questions? We should have enough models here. If we don't have enough models, let me know. So take Dr. Klein, put these tests down and get some more models back over here. I did have a practice test, like I said, set up in